I began to pursue the movie as well as putting together a new band, something that I frankly dreaded. Not for a second did I think that I could easily replace the signature sound of Van Halen, but I don't believe I had any real choice. If nothing else, this move was a jarring force that woke everybody up, especially the Van Halens. Suddenly, it wasn't about playing 6 or 8 stadium shows in a year. For them, it became exactly what it was for me. Again, going out on the road and barnstorming, canvassing the place, taking the campaign to the people. There was silence and dignity as I went about my way, putting my band together, working on the movie. Some 6 months later, perhaps less, somebody deposited a stack of magazines as long as your forearm on my desk, full of all the new Van Halen interviews. It had been easier for them to put a new album together because I had worked with Edward on half that album already. Brought in a new singer, went right to all those old tapes, and started with that as their go point. So it was much easier for them to reconstruct. It was going to take me a considerable while longer. So that first stack of magazines landed in front of me, and it was a Van Halen hatred campaign that was peddled belligerently and as strongly as it is to this day. There had been a spectacular group, spectacular writing unit, and a sensational show. If you got anywhere near any element of it, it changed your life. So at worst, I'm sad that I have to deal with their whining, but you're only as big as what aggravates you. So I took off and spent about 3 months really selling the idea of the movie. Let's finish up the script, and let me start looking around for some other musicians. Making a movie set was a side bet. Beyond that, I had no visions of being an actor or director. My day job is music, always has been. Everything else is a sidebar. Started snooping around. Saw a videotape with Steve Vai in it, who had been working with Frank Zappa, and had a wealth of information in terms of the School of Music approach, which is very different than my learning it at the local cantina and having to make a living with it. He looked pretty good on the video, so I made an effort to get in touch with him, and I met him, actually after a police raid at the local 01 gallery, an after-hours spot where I was a partner. We got busted every 3 months. There's supposedly no after-hours in LA. We ran into each other out on the sidewalk while the sun was coming up. We commenced writing songs. Composed most of what became Eat 'Em and Smile, which had nothing to do with Van Halen. Okay, metaphysically, it was a time of conflict. It's aggressive, okay, makes sense in the rearview mirror. But at the time, all it was to me was an idea from a book of old labels, from old fruit crates from the 20s and 30s. Eat 'Em and Smile was a label made for watermelons, and it pictured a little kid holding up a great big half of watermelon with a big bite missing out of it. You could just laser copy that right on my gravestone. I ate it and smiled. Makes perfect sense. We wrote songs in my basement. Took a few months to come up with a dozen tunes. Went to the studio, recorded it in fairly short order. We plowed ahead to success. The first record went double platinum. The videos had impact. Yankee Rose, Going Crazy. The tour was very successful. But with that frequently comes, quote unquote, I was actually the architect and now I shall architect even further. On the new album, Skyscraper, the keyboard player that we brought on the road, Brett Tuggle, started to contribute some songs. Was very much more oriented from the College of Musical Knowledge, 5 45-minute sets a night, had played with all kinds of other artists around the world. Brett wrote Just Like Paradise, which today is the theme song of a major radio station in Hawaii. It was also requested to be the theme song for Beverly Hills 90210. The manager didn't feel that the money they were offering was worthy of a phone call to me, so I never heard about it until some seasons later. But the song had impact. And Steve just hated it. He didn't want to play it. He was leaning farther and farther into that abstracted dimension of unusual chord structures, unusual time signatures. He headed out into the territory and kept on going. God bless. But our frame of reference became less and less mutual. After the Skyscraper tour, we went our separate ways. We split because of 2 schools of thought, 2 completely different mindsets, 2 different patterns on conditioning. Steve had never played in bars before. He had never done the College of Musical Knowledge, hence his music is way abstracted. It exists in a parallel universe, and we went our own ways. Well, trying to hire genius is like designing art by committee. Damn near impossible. But I came so close you could almost feel the heat coming off of it. With a fellow named Jason Becker. Jason was maybe 20, 21 years old. His parents had been like Haight-Ashbury hippies. So instead of growing up listening to Ed Van Halen records and duplicating that, he'd grown up listening to the old classics I had, as per his parents. Hendrix, Bob Dylan, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. What a wealth of references in his playing. He was just finding his way. You could hear the influences and name them if you were sharp. And he was a season or two away from where you couldn't name the influences anymore. It would then be a signature sound. He would become Jason Becker, the guitar player, as opposed to a guitar player. We made the album a little late enough, and as we were working on the songs, he was complaining of numbness in his leg. He was having a stiff leg, he was having trouble moving around. He had such a full, substantial, articulate sound, played through the simplest of equipment. One amp head, one set of speakers, a foot pedal or two, all of it Dennis the Menace together with spit and chicken wire. That kid could move air, man, and the kindest, gentlest, most flexible, absorbing, want-to-learn spirit that I've ever really worked with. Big hands, like 6 feet tall, just poised. It turns out that the little leg problem was ALS. He had Lou Gehrig's disease. Today's in a wheelchair and that's it. I cried when that verdict came in. The world was waiting to print his picture, man, and he got struck down way too fucking early in the game. As soon as he realized that he was going to start stiffening up all the way around, instead of balling up in depression, Jason just went to work big time. As his whole voodoo situation increased, he learned to use computers and worked through other musicians and folks, developed a support system, and released a solo album. Right around that point in time, I started to lose my desperate passion for putting a band together and trying to maximize what I was doing in rock and roll, working ensemble. You run into so many wannabes, never ever gonna be's, spotlight junkies, folks who'd play an Edward Van Halen riff and watch my face to see if I was impressed. Run into the likes of the studio drummer, who was brought in for $1,500 a day to play on the last album, and couldn't play a whole song straight through. He could only play with computerized click track, keeping time like a metronome. Playing in the studio, I learned, most session drummers play the song all the way through, then they go back in and fix all the slow parts. Ain't a problem I can't fix, but I can fix it in the mix. So you will never know at the buying end when you walk into the local record store. All of a sudden, Junior's playing live with a live band, and he's out of control. He's speeding up, he's slowing down, he's missing parts. Guitar players would do the same thing. Characters who would rehearse for 2 months, go on the road, and 2 weeks after you started, come in and hit you up for a $3,000 a week raise or they're gone. This is a carefully planned little missive to be delivered somewhere in the middle of nowhere, like northern Japan, so you're completely over barrel. Drummers who don't own a drum set, or show up in an audition explaining how the drum set is still in Seattle, guitar players who only own one guitar players who don't own their own amplifiers or their own set of speakers, and on and on. As I started to lose my passion for it, we could play Happy Birthday in Van Halen. It was a completely unique sound, full of soul power, sophisticated, musically adept. And here I'm playing with some stooge drummer who literally doesn't know how to end a song live. Musicians who would get in an argument with the manager and started crying because the big bad road manager screamed at them. I had to step in the middle of this. It was like something out of the Honeymooners. I felt like Norton. I was spending more time than not putting band-aids on issues and people's disagreements. I think you started to hear it in some of the music. Was trying to expand, but how do you expand with a group of people who are all more frequently than not have an agenda? They're working towards something else, or this is a temporary gig. There's somebody else on the phone. Luckily, I didn't stop my travels and generally living life, despite the tribulations of making rock music. So I have plenty more to tell of this 12-year period since I left Van Halen. But only half of it has anything to do with the music or the musicians that I was working with. Had some high points, some not, some remedial work, just trying to catch up where I'd ended up last. Just trying to get to the people up to normal reading levels, much less exploring the classics, much less writing one of your own. We were still working on commas and periods.